The stagecoach rattled to a stop in the dust-choked street of Tucson, Arizona, and Victoria Navarro knew she had made a terrible mistake coming here alone. The year was 1879, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town, turning the air thick and heavy as molasses. She stepped down from the coach, her dark hair plastered to her neck with sweat, her traveling dress rumpled and stained from 3 days of hard travel. The driver tossed her trunk down without ceremony, accepted his fare, and drove off before she could even ask for directions, leaving her standing in the middle of the street with everything she owned in the world and nowhere to go. Victoria had come to Tucson because her uncle had promised her a job at his mercantile. A fresh start after her father's death had left her penniless in Santa Fe. But as she stood there in the blazing afternoon heat, clutching the letter he had sent her 3 months ago, she realized she had no idea where to find him. The town stretched out before her in a jumble of adobe buildings and wooden storefronts, saloons and stables, all shimmering in the heat like a mirage. Dust devils swirled down the street, and somewhere a dog barked listlessly. She picked up her trunk, staggered a few steps under its weight, and set it down again. Her throat was parched, her head swimming. She needed water, shade, information. A group of men loitered outside a saloon across the street, watching her with undisguised interest. Their stares made her skin crawl. She turned away, scanning the buildings for something that looked helpful, respectable, safe. That was when she saw him. He was leading a paint horse down the street, his hat pulled low against the sun, his movements unhurried despite the heat. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a gun belt that sat low on his hips. But it was not the gun that caught her attention. It was the way he moved, with a quiet confidence that suggested he belonged here, that he knew every stone and shadow of this harsh land. Victoria made a decision born of desperation. She left her trunk where it sat and hurried toward him, her skirts kicking up little clouds of dust. "Excuse me, sir." He stopped and turned, and she got her first clear look at his face. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water, green-gray and clear. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his dark brown hair curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way that made her heart skip unexpectedly. "Madam." He touched the brim of his hat, his voice a low drawl that carried the accent of someone who had spent his whole life in the Southwest. "I apologize for bothering you, but I am looking for someone." "My uncle, Miguel Navarro. He owns a mercantile here. Do you know where I might find him?" Something flickered in those creek water eyes, gone too quickly for her to read. "Miguel Navarro. Yes, he wrote to me and asked me to come work for him. I have his letter right here." She fumbled in her reticule, suddenly desperate to prove she was not some random woman accosting strangers in the street. The cowboy took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and settled the hat back on his head. It seemed to be a habit when he was thinking. "Madam, I am real sorry to have to tell you this, but Miguel Navarro died about 6 weeks back. Heart gave out on him." The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria swayed, and the cowboy's hand shot out to steady her elbow. "Whoa there. When did you last eat or drink anything?" "This morning, some water, before we crossed." She could not finish the sentence. Her uncle was dead. Dead. She had traveled all this way, spent the last of her money on the stagecoach fare, and he was dead. She had no job, no family, nowhere to go. The enormity of it crashed over her like a wave, and she felt her knees buckle. The cowboy caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms supporting her weight easily. "Easy now. You are going to be all right, but you need to get out of this sun before you collapse entirely." He looked around, then seemed to make a decision. "My name is Ethan Wiley. I have a room at the boarding house just down the street. Mrs. Chen, who runs it, is a respectable woman. She will look after you while we figure out what to do." Victoria wanted to protest, to insist she could manage on her own, but the truth was she could not. The world was spinning, and her tongue felt thick in her mouth. She nodded weakly, and Ethan Wiley half carried her down the street, leaving his horse ground tied and her trunk sitting abandoned in the dust. The boarding house was a 2-story adobe building with a covered porch and window boxes full of struggling geraniums. Ethan kicked the door open and called out, "Mrs. Chen, I need some help here." A small Chinese woman appeared from the back, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at Victoria and started issuing rapid-fire orders. "Bring her to the parlor. I will get water and food. That girl is half dead from heat and exhaustion." Ethan deposited Victoria on a worn but comfortable sofa. Mrs. Chen arrived moments later with a pitcher of cool water and a cup. She held it to Victoria's lips, making her drink slowly. "Small sips, not too fast or you will be sick." The water was the most delicious thing Victoria had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but Mrs. Chen was firm, rationing it out until some color returned to Victoria's cheeks. Then she produced bread, cheese, and cold chicken, and watched sternly until Victoria had eaten every bite. Gradually, the world stopped spinning. Victoria looked up to find Ethan Wiley watching her with concern, his hat in his hands, standing near the doorway as though ready to bolt at any moment. "Thank you," she managed. "I am so sorry to be such trouble." "No trouble at all, miss." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I went back and got your trunk. It is out on the porch." Fresh panic seized her. "I cannot pay for a room. I used nearly all my money for the stage fare." Mrs. Chen made a dismissive noise. "We will worry about that later. Right now you need rest." "I have a small room on the second floor. Nothing fancy, but the bed is clean and the window catches the breeze." "But I cannot." "You can and you will." Mrs. Chen's tone brooked no argument. "Any niece of Miguel Navarro is welcome here. He was a good man and he would want someone to look after you." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You knew my uncle." Everyone knew Miguel. He was generous and kind, always willing to extend credit to families who were struggling. When he died, half the town came to his funeral. Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "You rest now. We will talk more when you are feeling better." Ethan picked up Victoria's trunk like it weighed nothing and followed Mrs. Chen upstairs. Victoria trailed after them on shaky legs, gripping the banister. The room was small, as promised, but spotlessly clean. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a washstand against another, and a small window looked out over the street. White muslin curtains stirred in the faint breeze. Ethan set down the trunk and turned to leave, but Victoria caught his sleeve. "Mr. Wiley, I do not know how to thank you. If you had not helped me, I do not know what would have happened." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Up close, she could see that his eyes were more green than gray, with flecks of gold around the pupils. "Like I said, no trouble at all. You get some rest now." "Wait. My uncle's mercantile. What happened to it?" A shadow crossed his face. "It is still there, but the bank took it over when he died. He had debts. They are trying to sell it, but there have not been any buyers yet." He hesitated, then added, "Your uncle was a good man, Miss Navarro. I am real sorry for your loss." Then he was gone, his boots echoing on the stairs. Victoria sank onto the bed, her mind reeling. She was alone in a strange town with no money, no prospects, and no family. The smart thing would be to use what little money she had left to buy a stage ticket back to Santa Fe. But back to what? There was nothing for her there either. She was still trying to decide what to do when exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the room was dark and cool. Moonlight streamed through the window, and she could hear voices and laughter drifting up from the saloons down the street. She had slept for hours. Her body ached, but her head was clear for the first time since she had arrived in Tucson. Victoria got up, splashed water on her face from the basin on the washstand, and tidied her hair as best she could. Then she went downstairs, following the smell of cooking food. She found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something fragrant. "You look better," the older woman observed. "Sit, I will make you a plate." "Mrs. Chen, I need to be honest with you. I only have $3 to my name. I cannot afford to stay here long." Mrs. Chen ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of Victoria, along with fresh bread and butter. "Eat first, then we talk." The stew was rich and savory, full of chunks of beef and vegetables. Victoria ate slowly, savoring every bite. When she was finished, Mrs. Chen poured them both tea and sat down across from her. "Your uncle helped me when I first came to Tucson," she said. "My husband had died and I had nothing. Miguel gave me credit at his store until I could get the boarding house running. He never pressed me for payment, never made me feel like charity. When I finally paid him back, he acted like I had done him a favor." She sipped her tea. "I owe him a debt. Looking after his niece is the least I can do. But I cannot take advantage of your kindness. I need to find work, some way to support myself." "What can you do?" It was a fair question. Victoria had been raised as a lady, taught to sew and paint and play the piano, skills that were useless in a frontier town. "I can read and write. I can keep accounts. I worked in my father's office before he died, and I can sew, though I do not know if anyone here would pay for such services." Mrs. Chen considered this. "The school teacher left last month to get married. The town has been looking for a replacement, but no one wants to come out here. Can you teach?" Hope flickered in Victoria's chest. "I think so. I had a good education. I could certainly teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history. Then tomorrow we will go see the town council. In the meantime, you stay here. You can help me around the boarding house to earn your keep until the teaching situation is settled. I can always use an extra pair of hands." Tears of gratitude spilled down Victoria's cheeks. Thank you so much." Mrs. Chen waved a hand dismissively. "No tears. We women have to look out for each other. Heaven knows the men are not going to do it." Over the next few days, Victoria settled into a routine at the boarding house. She helped Mrs. Chen with cooking, cleaning, and laundry. The work was hard and her hands grew rough, but she found satisfaction in it. There were 6 other boarders besides Ethan Wiley. An elderly prospector named Gus, 2 railroad workers, a dry goods salesman, and a young couple saving money for their own homestead. Ethan was polite but distant, offering her a courteous nod when they passed in the hallway or at meals, but never engaging in conversation. Victoria found herself watching for him, noticing things about him. How he always held the door for Mrs. Chen. How he kept his room neat and paid his rent on time. How he sometimes came back late at night, dusty and tired, but was always up early the next morning. She asked Mrs. Chen about him one evening as they folded laundry. "Ethan, he is a good boy. Works as a cowboy on one of the ranches outside town. Sometimes does odd jobs, guides people through the desert, breaks horses. He is honest and hardworking, not like some of these cowboys who spend all their pay on whiskey and cards." "Does he have family here?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "His parents died when he was young. Fever took them both. He was raised by his grandfather on a ranch in Texas, but the old man died a few years back. Ethan drifted west and ended up here." It explained the sadness Victoria sometimes saw in his eyes, the loneliness that seemed to cling to him despite his quiet competence. On her 4th day in Tucson, Mrs. Chen took her to meet the town council. They met in the back room of the general store, 5 men in varying states of middle age, all looking skeptical when Mrs. Chen presented Victoria as a potential schoolteacher. "You are awfully young," said Mr. Hartwell, who owned the general store. "And you are a woman alone. How do we know you will not just up and leave like the last teacher did?" Victoria lifted her chin. "I have nowhere else to go, Mr. Hartwell. My uncle is dead and I have no other family. I need this position and I promise you I will work hard to earn it. I can teach reading, writing, mathematics, history, geography, and literature. I can start immediately." The men conferred among themselves in low voices. Finally, Mr. Hartwell spoke. "The job pays $20 a month, plus you get to live in the teacherage, which is a small cabin behind the schoolhouse. It is not much, but it is clean. You will teach Monday through Friday, and we expect you to maintain discipline and make sure the children actually learn something. Do you think you can handle that, $20 a month?" It was not much, but it was more than she had now. "Yes, sir, I can handle it." "Then the job is yours. You can start Monday." Victoria felt like she could float out of the store. She had a job, a real job. She was not going to starve or end up on the streets. She thanked the council profusely, and Mrs. Chen walked her back to the boarding house with a satisfied expression. "You will do well," the older woman said. "You have a good head on your shoulders." That Sunday, Victoria moved her few possessions into the teacherage. It was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a stove, a table, and 2 chairs. But it was hers, and after the uncertainty of the past week, that felt like a miracle. The schoolhouse itself was a simple wooden structure with rough-hewn benches and desks, a blackboard at the front, and windows on either side to let in light. Victoria spent the afternoon cleaning it, sweeping out the dust and wiping down the desks, preparing for her students. Monday morning arrived bright and early. Victoria dressed carefully in her most respectable dress, pinned her hair up in a neat bun, and stood at the door of the schoolhouse as children began to arrive. There were 15 of them, ranging in age from 6 to 14. They eyed her with curiosity and suspicion, testing her already. "Good morning," she said firmly. "My name is Miss Navarro and I am your new teacher. Please take your seats and we will begin." The first day was chaos. The children talked, threw spitballs, and generally ignored her attempts to teach. By the end of the day, Victoria's head was pounding and her voice was hoarse, but she did not give up. She came back on Tuesday and laid down the law. There would be rules in her classroom, and there would be consequences for breaking them. It took 2 weeks, but gradually the children settled down. They realized she was serious, that she expected them to learn and would not tolerate nonsense. But she was also kind, patient, and genuinely interested in their progress. She started to win them over. One afternoon in late October, she was walking back to the teacherage after a long day when she saw Ethan Wiley outside the stable, working with a young horse. The animal was wild-eyed and skittish, dancing at the end of the lead rope. Ethan stood calmly in the center of the corral, his voice low and soothing, letting the horse circle around him. Victoria stopped to watch, fascinated. Ethan never pulled on the rope, never forced the horse to do anything. He just stood there, patient and steady, until the horse's curiosity overcame its fear. Gradually, the circles got smaller. The horse came closer, sniffing at Ethan's outstretched hand. He stroked its nose, still murmuring in that low, calm voice. "You are good at that," Victoria called out before she could stop herself. Ethan looked up, startled. For a moment, she thought he would just nod and go back to his work. But instead, he led the horse over to the fence where she stood. "It is just a matter of patience," he said. "Horses are like people. They need to trust you before they will let you lead them." How long does it take to earn their trust? Depends on the horse. This one, she was abused by her last owner. She is scared of everything. It might take weeks or it might take months. But I will get there eventually. Victoria stroked the horse's velvety nose, and the animal blew softly against her palm. She is beautiful. She is, Ethan agreed. Owner wanted to sell her for glue, said she was too wild to be any use. I bought her off him for $5. Figured she deserved a chance. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and saw beneath the quiet exterior to the kind heart underneath. He rescued broken horses. He had rescued her too, in a way, when she had been lost and desperate. That was kind of you, she said softly. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. She is a good horse, just needed someone to give her time. They stood there for a moment, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Then Ethan said, I heard you got the teaching job. How is it going? It is going well, I think. The children are starting to settle down. Some of them are quite bright, actually. That is good. The town needs a school. Too many children growing up wild out here, not knowing how to read or write. You read, Mr. Wiley? Some. My grandfather taught me my letters. I can get by. An idea occurred to her. If you ever wanted to improve your reading, I would be happy to help. I could lend you books, or we could have lessons in the evening. He looked surprised. That is kind of you to offer, but I would not want to take up your time. It would not be taking up my time. I would enjoy it, honestly. Teaching adults is different from teaching children, more rewarding in some ways. Ethan considered this, stroking the horse's neck. All right, he said finally. I would like that. When would you want to start? How about tomorrow evening? After supper. You could come to the teacherage. Tomorrow evening it is, then. Victoria walked back to her little cabin with a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the teaching job and everything to do with the prospect of seeing Ethan Wiley again. The next evening, Ethan knocked on her door just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He had cleaned up, she noticed, his hair damp and his shirt freshly washed. He held his hat in his hands, looking nervous. Come in, Victoria said, stepping aside. I have coffee on the stove, and I found some books that I think you might enjoy. They settled at her small table, the lamp casting a warm glow over the pages of the book she had chosen, a collection of stories about the frontier. Ethan read slowly but carefully, sounding out the harder words. When he finished a passage, Victoria would ask him questions to make sure he understood it, then explain any words or concepts that were new to him. She discovered that he was intelligent and curious, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He made observations about the stories that she had never considered, coming at them from the perspective of someone who actually lived the life being described. This writer, he said, tapping the page, has never actually been on a cattle drive. He gets it all wrong. We do not sit around the campfire singing songs every night. Mostly we are too tired and too sore to do anything but eat and sleep. Victoria laughed. You should write your own stories then. Tell people what it is really like. I am not much of a writer. Besides, who would want to read about the boring parts? How your backside goes numb from 12 hours in the saddle, or how you can smell a herd of cattle from a mile away, or how the dust gets into everything, your food, your bedroll, your clothes. I would want to read it, Victoria said. The truth is always more interesting than fantasy. Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection. Victoria felt her breath catch. In the lamplight, his eyes were more gold than green, warm and alive. He looked away first, clearing his throat. I should go. It is getting late and you probably have work to do for school tomorrow. Of course. Victoria stood, trying to hide her disappointment. Same time next week, I would like that. After he left, Victoria sat for a long time at her table, the book still open, thinking about the way he had looked at her. She had not come to Tucson looking for romance. She had come looking for survival. But somewhere between teaching children and reading with a cowboy by lamplight, her life had started to feel like something more than just existing. The weeks turned into months. Victoria fell into a rhythm, teaching during the day, preparing lessons in the evening, and twice a week, reading with Ethan. His skills improved rapidly, and soon they were tackling more challenging material. Newspapers, technical manuals about ranching, even some poetry, which made Ethan squirm with embarrassment. "I do not understand half of what this fellow is trying to say," he complained, frowning at a poem by Whitman. "That is because poetry is not meant to be understood with your mind. It is meant to be felt with your heart." Ethan looked skeptical. "That sounds like something a poet would say." Victoria laughed, and the sound filled the small cabin with warmth. "Just try it. Read it out loud slowly and do not worry about understanding every word. Just listen to how it sounds, how it makes you feel." Ethan sighed but did as she asked, his deep voice stumbling over the unfamiliar cadences. When he finished, he looked up at her. "I still do not get it. What did it make you feel?" He thought about it. "Lonely, I guess. Like the poet is searching for something he cannot quite reach." "Exactly. You do understand it." As winter arrived, bringing cooler temperatures to the desert, Victoria realized she was happier than she had been in years. She loved teaching, loved the satisfaction of watching a child's face light up when they finally understood a difficult concept. She had made friends in town, other women who invited her to quilting bees and church socials. And she had Ethan, whose quiet presence had become essential to her life. She was not sure when friendship had turned into something deeper. Maybe it was the evening he had shown up at her door in a rainstorm, drenched to the skin, because he had promised to come for his lesson and refused to break his word. Maybe it was the way he always remembered little things she mentioned in passing, showing up with a book she had wanted or a cutting from a plant she had admired. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of hours spent together, talking and laughing and sharing the small details of their lives. What she did know was that she was falling in love with Ethan Wiley, and she had no idea if he felt the same way. Christmas came, and the town put on a celebration at the church. There was singing and food and gifts for the children. Victoria wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the dark richness of her hair and eyes. She saw Ethan across the room, talking to one of the ranchers, and her heart did a little skip. He caught her eye and she smiled back. Later, when people had started dancing to the music of a fiddle and guitar, he appeared at her side. "Miss Navarro, would you do me the honor of a dance?" She placed her hand in his. "I would be delighted, Mr. Wiley." He led her onto the dance floor, and they moved together to the music. Ethan was a surprisingly good dancer, his movements sure and confident. He held her at a respectable distance, but Victoria was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the warmth of his palm against hers. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He was wearing a new shirt, she noticed, dark green that made his eyes even more striking. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw. "Victoria," he said, then stopped. It was the first time he had used her given name. She looked up at him expectantly. "Yes, never mind, it can wait." But before he could say more, the song ended and they were swept apart by other dancers. Victoria spent the rest of the evening searching for him in the crowd, but he seemed to have disappeared. She walked home alone, disappointed and confused. What had he been about to say? And why had he changed his mind? The answer came 3 days later when Ethan showed up at the teacherage just after dawn, looking grim. "I need to talk to you," he said without preamble. Victoria, still in her dressing gown, invited him in. "What is wrong?" "I am leaving Tucson. The ranch I work for is moving their operation south, closer to the border. They have asked me to go with them." Victoria felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "When?" "End of the week." "That is only 4 days." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of agitation. "I have been trying to figure out how to tell you. At the dance, I almost said something, but I lost my nerve." Victoria sat down heavily in one of her chairs. "I see." Ethan crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Victoria, I need to be honest with you. These past few months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant everything to me. You have become the most important person in my life, but I am just a cowboy. I do not have anything to offer you. No land, no real prospects. And now I am leaving, and I do not know when or if I will be back." Victoria stared at him, her heart pounding. "Ethan, are you saying that you have feelings for me?" "I am saying that I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe longer. But I did not think it was fair to say anything when I have nothing to give you." Joy and pain warred in Victoria's chest. "Nothing to give me." "Ethan, you have given me everything. Your kindness when I was lost, your friendship when I was alone, your time and attention and care. How can you say you have nothing to offer? Because it is true. You deserve someone who can give you a real home, security, a future, not some drifter who lives out of a rented room." Victoria pulled her hands free and stood up, pacing the small room. "You think I care about those things? I came here with nothing, Ethan. Less than nothing. I was desperate and alone, and you helped me without asking for anything in return. You are the best man I have ever known, and if you think your worth is measured in land or money, then you are wrong." Ethan stood slowly. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you too. I have loved you for so long that I cannot remember when it started, and if you are leaving, then I want to go with you." "Victoria, you cannot. You have a job here, friends, a life. I cannot ask you to give that up." "You are not asking, I am offering." "I am offering you everything I have, Ethan. My heart, my future, my life. All I am asking in return is that you let me be with you." Ethan closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Are you sure? Because once we do this, there is no going back." "I have never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, and it was like coming home. His lips were warm and sure, his arms strong around her. Victoria melted into him, all the weeks of longing and uncertainty dissolving into this perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We should get married," he said. "I am not going to take you with me unless we do this properly." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Wiley?" "It is, Miss Navarro. Will you marry me?" "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 days later by the circuit judge who happened to be passing through Tucson. Mrs. Chen was Victoria's witness, and Gus, the prospector, stood up for Ethan. It was a simple ceremony, but Victoria did not care. She was marrying the man she loved, and that was all that mattered. She gave notice at the school, and the town council was disappointed but understanding. Mrs. Chen hugged her tightly and made her promise to write. Victoria packed her few belongings, said goodbye to her students and friends, and on a cold January morning in 1880, she and Ethan set out on horseback for the ranch where he would be working. The journey took 3 days. They rode through spectacular desert country, past towering saguaro cacti and red rock formations that glowed in the sunset. At night, they made camp under the stars, and Ethan taught Victoria how to cook over an open fire and read the patterns of the constellations. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. On their wedding night in a small hotel in a town whose name Victoria immediately forgot, Ethan made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt completely and utterly content. "No regrets?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Not a single one." The ranch was called the Double Bar, and it sprawled across thousands of acres near the Mexican border. The owner, a gruff man named Samuel Harrison, looked surprised when Ethan showed up with a wife but took it in stride. "You will live in the bunkhouse until I can get one of the line shacks fixed up for you," he said. "It is not much, but it will give you privacy." The line shack turned out to be a small cabin about 5 miles from the main ranch house, nestled in a canyon with a spring-fed creek running nearby. It had been used as a shelter for cowboys watching over cattle in the winter, and it was rough. One room with a dirt floor, a fireplace, and not much else. Victoria looked at it and saw potential. "We can make this work." Over the next few weeks, she and Ethan transformed the cabin into a home. They laid wooden planks over the dirt to make a proper floor. Ethan built furniture, a bed frame, a table, chairs, shelves. Victoria sewed curtains and made cushions from flour sacks. They whitewashed the walls and hung pictures cut from magazines. It was hard work, but Victoria loved every minute of it. She loved working side by side with Ethan, loved the satisfaction of building something together. And she loved the evenings when they would sit by the fire and read to each other or just talk, Ethan's arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. Ethan worked long days on the ranch, rounding up cattle, mending fences, breaking horses. Victoria kept house and tended a small garden by the creek. She also started teaching the children of the ranch hands, setting up a makeshift school in the barn. Samuel Harrison was pleased, saying it would keep the families happy and improve productivity. That spring, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening as they sat watching the sunset from their cabin porch. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "I am sure." Mrs. Harrison confirmed it. The baby should come in late October. Ethan pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapped around her protectively. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, Victoria. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. You have given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of this gift." "Your safety is enough," Victoria whispered, thinking of that first day in Tucson when she had tried to pay him for his help and he had refused. "That is all I have ever needed. To know that I am safe with you." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was brutal, and Victoria spent many afternoons resting in the shade by the creek, too tired and uncomfortable to do much else. Ethan worried constantly, bringing her cool water and making her put her feet up. The other ranch wives helped too, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. In late October, on a cool, clear night, Victoria went into labor. Ethan rode like the wind to fetch the midwife from the main ranch, then paced outside the cabin while Mrs. Harrison and the midwife attended to his wife. The hours stretched on, and Ethan thought he might go mad from the worry. Finally, as dawn broke over the canyon, he heard the thin wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Harrison emerged from the cabin, beaming. "You have a son, Ethan. A healthy, strong boy, and Victoria is tired but doing well." Ethan burst into the cabin to find Victoria propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. He approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. His eyes were shut tight, and his little fists waved in the air. Ethan felt something in his chest crack open, a flood of love so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. "You want to hold him." Ethan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Victoria placed the baby in his arms. He was so small, so fragile. Ethan was terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong. But the baby settled against his chest, and Ethan felt a sense of rightness, of purpose, that he had never experienced before. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked. They had discussed names for weeks, unable to agree. But looking at his son now, Ethan knew. "James, after my grandfather, James Wiley," Victoria said, trying it out. "I like it. James Ethan Wiley." Over the next few months, they settled into the routines of new parenthood. Victoria nursed the baby and sang to him, while Ethan changed diapers and walked the floor with James when he fussed at night. They were exhausted but happy, marveling at every tiny change in their son. When James was 6 months old, Samuel Harrison called Ethan into his office. The older man looked serious and Ethan's heart sank. Was he being let go? "Sit down, Ethan," Harrison said. "I have a proposition for you." Ethan sat, wary. "You are the best cowboy I have ever had working for me. You are reliable, skilled, and the men respect you. I'm getting older and I need someone I can trust to manage the day-to-day operations of this ranch. I want to make you my foreman. The job comes with a significant raise and a house near the main ranch. What do you say?" Ethan was stunned. "Mr. Harrison, I do not know what to say. This is incredibly generous. You have earned it. And that wife of yours has been a godsend, teaching the children and helping with the women. You are both assets to this ranch, so what do you say? Will you take the job?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely yes." Victoria was overjoyed when he told her. The house Harrison provided was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a front porch with a swing. They moved in that summer, and Victoria immediately set about making it a home, planting flowers and vegetables, hanging curtains, filling the rooms with warmth and light. Ethan thrived in his new role. He had a natural gift for leadership, and the men responded well to his fair but firm management style. The ranch prospered, and Harrison came to rely on Ethan more and more. As James grew from baby to toddler, he developed his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was curious and fearless, constantly getting into things he should not. Victoria spent her days chasing after him, teaching him his letters and reading him stories. Ethan taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, putting him on a gentle old mare and leading her around the corral. 3 years after James was born, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1884 she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah, and she was the image of her mother with dark eyes and olive skin. Ethan adored both his children equally, but there was something special about having a daughter. He was fiercely protective of Sarah, vetting every little boy who came near her and teaching her to shoot almost as soon as she was old enough to hold a rifle. "You are going to terrify any young man who tries to court her," Victoria teased. "Good," Ethan replied. "That is the idea." The years passed in a blur of work and family. James grew tall and strong, following his father around the ranch and learning everything Ethan could teach him about cattle and horses. Sarah was quieter, preferring books to the outdoors, and Victoria delighted in teaching her to read and write and think for herself. In 1887, when James was 7 and Sarah was 3, Samuel Harrison died peacefully in his sleep. His will contained a surprise. He left the Double Bar Ranch to Ethan, along with a letter explaining his reasoning. "You have been more than a foreman to me. You have been like a son. I have no children of my own, and I cannot think of anyone I would rather have running this ranch than you. Take care of it, and take care of the people who depend on it. Ethan was overwhelmed. He and Victoria now owned thousands of acres of prime grazing land, along with hundreds of head of cattle. It was more than he had ever dreamed of, more than he had thought possible for a man like him. "What do you think?" he asked Victoria that night as they lay in bed. "It is a huge responsibility. I think you can handle it. You have been running this ranch for years already. The only thing that changes is the name on the deed. It changes everything. We can give our children a legacy now, something real and lasting. We already were giving them that. A loving home, a good education, values that will serve them well. The ranch is just land, Ethan. What matters is the family we have built on it." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it. You earned every bit of happiness you have." As the owner of the double bar, Ethan made changes. He improved the bunkhouse, increased wages for the cowboys, and made sure the ranch hands' families had access to a school and a doctor. He was a fair employer, and word spread. Soon, the best cowboys in the territory were coming to work for him. Victoria continued teaching, eventually building a proper schoolhouse on the ranch property. She taught not just the ranch children but also the children from surrounding homesteads, becoming a beloved figure in the community. In 1890, Victoria gave birth to twin boys, much to everyone's surprise. They named them Michael and Matthew, and they were identical in every way except temperament. Michael was quiet and thoughtful, while Matthew was loud and rambunctious. Between the twins and their older siblings, the house was constantly filled with noise and laughter. Ethan found himself thinking often of that day in Tucson when he had first seen Victoria standing lost and desperate in the street. If someone had told him then that he would end up married to her, with 4 children and a thriving ranch, he would have thought them crazy. But here he was, living a life richer than anything he could have imagined. And it all started because he had stopped to help a stranger in need. One evening, when Victoria was putting the twins to bed and James and Sarah were doing their homework, Ethan sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the desert. The land stretched out before him, vast and beautiful, painted in shades of orange and gold. Victoria joined him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed since we met, about how grateful I am for every moment of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made us stronger." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere in the house, one of the twins started crying, and Sarah's voice could be heard soothing him. James was practicing his reading aloud, stumbling over the words but determined to get them right. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped to help me that day?" Victoria asked. "All the time. And then I thank God that I did. I tried to pay you, remember? I offered you everything I had." Ethan smiled. "And I told you that your safety was enough. I meant it then and I mean it now. All I ever wanted was to know that you were safe and cared for. You have given me so much more than that. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We gave each other that," Ethan corrected. "None of this would exist without you. You are the heart of this family, Victoria. You are the reason we all thrive." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Ethan Wiley. I have loved you from the moment you caught me before I fell in the street in Tucson, and I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you, Victoria Wiley, more than words can say." The years continued to pass. James grew into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility on the ranch. At 18, he was already an excellent cowboy and a natural leader like his father. Sarah, at 14, was talking about becoming a teacher like her mother, though she also had a talent for drawing that Victoria encouraged. The twins, now 6, were inseparable, getting into mischief together and keeping everyone on their toes. The double bar continued to prosper under Ethan's management. He diversified, adding sheep and horses to the cattle operation. He invested in better water systems and improved breeding stock. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he was generous with his knowledge. Victoria's school had grown to include nearly 30 students. She hired an assistant teacher and began offering classes for adults in the evenings, teaching reading and writing to ranch hands who had never had the opportunity to learn. It was fulfilling work, and she loved seeing the pride on a grown man's face when he wrote his name for the first time. In 1896, when Victoria was 34 and Ethan was 36, they took a trip to San Francisco to celebrate their 15th wedding anniversary. It was the first time either of them had been to a big city, and they were overwhelmed by the crowds and noise and sheer scale of it all. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate in restaurants, and went to the theater. It was exciting and new, but by the end of a week, they were both homesick for the wide open spaces of the ranch. "I never thought I would miss the smell of cattle," Victoria said as they boarded the train home. Ethan laughed. "I never thought I would miss the dust, but I do. This place is too clean, too crowded. Give me the desert any day." When they arrived back at the ranch, their children rushed out to greet them, and Ethan scooped the twins up in his arms while Sarah and James talked over each other, trying to tell them everything that had happened in their absence. "It is good to be home," Ethan said, looking at Victoria over the children's heads. "It is," she agreed. "This is where we belong." As James approached his 20th birthday, he began courting a young woman named Emma, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. She was sweet and kind, and she clearly adored James. Victoria approved, and Ethan grudgingly admitted that the young man had chosen well. They were married in the spring of 1898, and Victoria cried happy tears as she watched her son take his vows. It seemed like only yesterday that he had been a tiny baby in her arms, and now he was a man, starting his own family. James and Emma built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, and a year later, they presented Ethan and Victoria with their first grandchild, a baby girl named Rose. Ethan was besotted with his granddaughter, carrying her around the ranch and singing to her in his off-key baritone. "You are going to spoil her," Victoria warned. "That is what grandparents are for," Ethan replied, bouncing Rose on his knee. Sarah, true to her word, went to teachers' college in Tucson and came back with a degree and a fierce determination to improve education in rural areas. She took over running the school from Victoria, implementing new teaching methods and expanding the curriculum. The twins, now 14, were already showing signs of the men they would become. Michael was interested in the business side of ranching, always asking questions about accounts and markets. Matthew wanted to be a veterinarian, spending hours with the ranch animals and reading every book on animal husbandry he could find. One evening in 1900, as Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan said, "Do you ever think about that first day in Tucson?" "Often," Victoria admitted. "I was so scared and alone I did not know what I was going to do. I am glad I was there. I am glad I could help you." "You did more than help me, Ethan. You saved me. In every way a person can be saved." Ethan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You saved me too. I was drifting before I met you, just going through the motions of living. You gave me purpose, a reason to build something lasting. We built it together." "Yes, we did." They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. In the house, they could hear Sarah playing the piano, a Mozart piece she had been practicing. The twins were arguing about something in the barn, their voices carrying across the yard. From James and Emma's house, they could see lamplight in the windows and hear the faint sound of Rose crying. "This is what happiness looks like," Victoria said softly. "Not perfection, but this, family and love and a place to belong." "I would not change a single thing," Ethan agreed. As the new century dawned, the Double Bar Ranch was thriving. Ethan had built it into one of the most successful ranches in the territory, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. But he was proudest of the family he and Victoria had created. In 1902, Matthew announced that he had been accepted to veterinary school in Colorado. It was bittersweet for Victoria, watching another child prepare to leave home, but she was proud of his ambition. Michael, meanwhile, had taken over most of the financial management of the ranch, freeing Ethan to focus on the day-to-day operations. Sarah met a young lawyer named Thomas who had moved to the area, and they were married in 1903. The wedding was held at the ranch, with guests coming from all over the territory. It was a grand celebration, and Victoria smiled through happy tears as she watched her daughter dance with her new husband. James and Emma had 2 more children, a boy and another girl, expanding the family even further. The ranch house rang with the laughter of grandchildren, and Ethan found himself more and more in the role of patriarch, dispensing wisdom and settling disputes. One day in the spring of 1905, Victoria found Ethan in the barn, brushing down his horse. He was 51 now, his hair shot through with silver, his face weathered by decades in the sun. But to Victoria, he was as handsome as he had been the day she had first seen him leading his paint horse down the street in Tucson. "Do you remember the horse you were gentling that day I stopped to watch you?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "The mare who had been abused, of course. She turned out to be one of the best horses I ever owned. Smart, loyal, brave. She lived to be 23 years old. You were so patient with her. That was when I started to fall in love with you, I think, watching you work with that horse." Ethan set down the brush and pulled Victoria into his arms. "I fell in love with you the moment I caught you before you hit the ground. You looked up at me with those dark eyes and I was lost. We have had a good life, have we not? The best life. Better than I ever deserved." "You deserved every bit of it, Ethan Wiley. You are the finest man I have ever known." They stood there in the quiet barn, holding each other, the years falling away until they were young again. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last forever. In 1907, Matthew returned from veterinary school and set up practice on the ranch, treating not just their animals but those of all the surrounding ranches and homesteads. He was gifted with animals, just as his father had been, and his practice quickly grew. Michael married a woman named Catherine, who was as sharp with numbers as he was, and they became the business brain of the ranch, expanding into new markets and increasing profits. James took over more and more of the physical management of the ranch as Ethan began to slow down. By 1910, Ethan and Victoria had 8 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch had grown to encompass over 15,000 acres, with hundreds of employees. But Ethan still made it a point to know every cowboy's name, to ask about their families, to treat them with the same respect he had always shown. One evening, as they celebrated Victoria's 48th birthday with a family dinner, Ethan stood and raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, "to my wife, who has been my partner in everything for 30 years. You came into my life when I was just a drifting cowboy with nothing to offer but a willing heart. You saw past that to the man I could become, and you stood by me through every challenge and triumph. You gave me children and grandchildren, a home and a legacy. But most importantly, you gave me love. Real, lasting, unconditional love. I am the luckiest man alive, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of you." Victoria had tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, I am the lucky one. You gave me safety when I had nothing. You gave me a home when I was lost. And you have loved me with a devotion that has never wavered, not for a single day. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you until my last breath." The family applauded, and James stood to add his own toast. "To Mom and Dad, who showed us what real love looks like. You built something amazing here, not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy. We are all blessed to be part of it." More toasts followed, each child and grandchild adding their words of love and appreciation. By the end, both Ethan and Victoria were overwhelmed with emotion. That night, lying in bed, Victoria said, "Do you think we did a good job? With the children, with the ranch, with everything. I think we did the best we could. And looking at our children and grandchildren, I would say we did a pretty good job. I want them to know the story. How we met, how we fell in love. I want them to understand that even when things seem hopeless, there is always a chance for happiness. Then we should write it down, not for publication but for the family, our story in our own words." Over the next few months, they did exactly that. They sat together in the evenings, remembering and writing, capturing the details of their courtship and marriage, the early struggles and later triumphs. It became a family treasure, passed down through the generations. In 1915, the ranch celebrated its 35th anniversary under Ethan's ownership. It was a huge celebration, with people coming from all over Arizona to attend. There were speeches and awards, music and dancing. But the highlight of the evening was when Ethan and Victoria danced together, moving with the ease of long practice, their eyes locked on each other. 35 years, Victoria marveled. "Where did the time go?" "Into living," Ethan replied. "Into building this life with you." "If you could go back and do it all over again, would you change anything?" Ethan thought about it. "Not a single thing. Every joy, every sorrow, every moment led us to this, to now, to each other. I would not trade that for anything." As they grew older, Ethan and Victoria gradually handed over more and more responsibility to their children. James ran the cattle operation. Michael handled the finances. Matthew took care of the animals. Sarah managed the school. The twins, now in their 30s, each had their own roles. But Ethan and Victoria remained the heart of the family, the ones everyone turned to for advice and comfort. They were the matriarch and patriarch, respected and beloved by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren alike. In the summer of 1920, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. All 4 children came home for the celebration, along with their spouses and children. The ranch house was full to bursting, and Victoria spent days cooking and baking, preparing for the feast. On the day of the anniversary, they held a party under the cottonwood trees by the creek. There was music and laughter, food and dancing. Ethan and Victoria sat in places of honor, watching their family celebrate. 40 years, Ethan said, squeezing Victoria's hand. 40 years since I married the most amazing woman in the world. 40 years since I married the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known, Victoria replied. Their oldest grandson, James's son, stood to give a speech. Grandpa and Grandma, you have shown us what it means to love and be loved. You have built not just a ranch, but a family that spans generations. We are all here because of the choices you made, the love you shared, the values you instilled in us. Thank you for everything. The party went on late into the night, and when it finally ended, Ethan and Victoria walked hand in hand back to their house. They sat on the porch swing, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. I cannot believe it has been 40 years, Victoria said. It feels like yesterday that you caught me in the street in Tucson. Best thing I ever did, Ethan said, stopping to help you. I tried to pay you, remember? Ethan smiled. You did. You offered me everything you had, $3 and your gratitude. And you said my safety was enough. That you did not want payment. I meant it. Your safety, your happiness, that was all the payment I needed. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. You have given me so much more than safety, Ethan. You have given me a life of love and purpose and joy. We gave that to each other. They sat in silence for a while, and then Victoria said, Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if we had never met? Sometimes. But I do not like to think about it. A life without you is no life at all. I feel the same way. You are my heart, Ethan Wiley. You always have been. As the years continued to pass, Ethan and Victoria settled into the quiet rhythms of old age. They spent their days on the porch, watching the grandchildren and great-grandchildren play. They took slow walks around the ranch, remembering all the years they had spent here together. They read to each other in the evenings, just as they had done when they were young. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren. The family grew larger with each passing year, branches spreading out across Arizona and beyond. But they all came home for the holidays, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter and love. In 1925, on a warm spring evening, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch watching the sunset. Ethan was 71 now, his hair white, his movements slow. Victoria was 63, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with the passage of time. But when they looked at each other, they saw the young people they had been, the love that had never faded. I have been thinking, Ethan said, about everything we have been through. All the years, all the changes, and I realized something. What is that? I would do it all again. Every single moment. The good and the bad, the easy and the hard. As long as I was with you, it was worth it. Victoria felt tears in her eyes. I feel the same way. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You will never have to. No matter what happens, no matter where we go from here, we will be together. That is a promise. I know, and you always keep your promises. They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The desert stretched out before them, vast and beautiful, the land they had made their home. It is a good life we have built, Ethan said. The best life, Victoria agreed. And sitting there on the porch of the ranch house they had shared for so many years, surrounded by the evidence of the love they had created, Ethan and Victoria knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found a love that would last forever, a partnership that had weathered every storm, a happiness that came from building a life together one day at a time. Years later, when their great-grandchildren asked about the story of how they met, Ethan and Victoria would sit them down and tell them about a hot day in Tucson in 1879. When a desperate young woman had stepped off a stagecoach with nowhere to go, and a kind cowboy had stopped to help her. She offered me everything she had, Ethan would say, his eyes twinkling, $3 whole. And he refused payment, Victoria would add, taking his hand. He said my safety was enough. But it was not just your safety I wanted, Ethan would continue. It was your happiness, your trust, your love. And you gave me all of that and more. We gave it to each other, Victoria would correct gently. That is what love is. Giving and receiving, supporting and being supported, loving and being loved. And the great-grandchildren would listen, wide-eyed, to the story of how a chance meeting in the Arizona desert had led to a love that spanned decades and generations. A love that had built a legacy that would endure long after both Ethan and Victoria were gone. In the fall of 1928, Ethan fell ill. It started as a cough, but it quickly developed into pneumonia. Victoria nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his side. The family gathered, knowing that the end was near, but Ethan rallied, his stubborn will pulling him back from the brink. By Christmas, he was back on his feet, weaker than before but still very much alive. Victoria thanked God for the extra time, knowing that each day with Ethan was a precious gift. They lived 3 more years together, quiet years filled with small pleasures. Morning coffee on the porch. Afternoon naps in the swing. Evening walks around the garden, reading together by lamplight. The simple comfort of a hand to hold, a familiar voice, a presence that had become as essential as breathing. In the spring of 1931, Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep, Victoria's hand in his. He was 77 years old, and he had lived a full and happy life. The family mourned, but they also celebrated the incredible man he had been and the legacy he had left behind. Victoria lived another 12 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She remained active and engaged, still teaching occasionally, still tending her garden, still telling stories about the early days on the ranch. But everyone could see that a part of her had gone with Ethan. She missed him with an ache that never fully healed, a longing for the other half of herself. She looked forward to the day when they would be reunited, when she would see his creek water eyes and his crooked smile again. Victoria passed away in her sleep in 1943 at the age of 81. Her last words, spoken to Sarah, who was sitting with her, were, "I see him. He is waiting for me." They buried her next to Ethan in the family cemetery on the ranch under a stand of cottonwood trees. The headstone read, Victoria Navarro Wiley, 1862-1943. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher, she offered him everything she had. He said her safety was enough. Together they built a love that lasted forever. And beneath it, Ethan's stone. Ethan Wiley, 1854-1931. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, and rancher. His kindness saved her. Her love redeemed him. Together they built a legacy that endures. The Double Bar Ranch remained in the family for generations, each descendant adding their own chapter to the story that Ethan and Victoria had begun. The schoolhouse that Victoria built still stands, now a museum dedicated to her memory. The family gathered there every year on the anniversary of Ethan and Victoria's wedding, telling their story to the newest generation, ensuring that their love would never be forgotten. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the Arizona desert and the wind whispers through the cottonwood trees, some say you can still see them. An old cowboy and his wife, walking hand in hand through the ranch they built together, their love transcending time and death, eternal as the desert sky, enduring as the land they made their home. Their story became a legend in the family, a touchstone for what love should be. When grandchildren faced difficult decisions about marriage or life, they would think of Ethan and Victoria. How they had met when Victoria had nothing. How Ethan had helped her without expecting anything in return. How their love had grown from that simple act of kindness into something that sustained them through decades of joy and hardship. The letter Victoria had written about their courtship, carefully preserved in the family archives, was read at every wedding. The passage where she described offering Ethan payment and his response that her safety was enough became a symbol of selfless love, of caring more for another person's welfare than for one's own gain. The ranch itself became a testament to what two people could build when they worked together with love and trust. From that small line shack where they had first lived to the thriving operation it became, every building and fence post represented their partnership, their shared vision, their commitment to creating something lasting. And so the love story of Ethan Wiley and Victoria Navarro lived on, not just in memories and letters and family lore, but in the very land they had walked together, in the lives they had touched, in the generations they had created. It was a love born in the harsh beauty of the Arizona desert, tested by time and hardship, and proven strong enough to last not just a lifetime, but forever. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch today, still tell the story of how it all began with a cowboy stopping to help a lost young woman on a dusty street in Tucson. They speak of Ethan's kindness and Victoria's courage, of how two people from different worlds found each other and built a life that exceeded anything either of them could have imagined. And when they tell the story, they always end the same way. She offered him everything she had. He said her safety was enough. And from that simple exchange, a love was born that would echo through the ages, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love.